Hey everybody, how you guys doing? So, sorry to keep you waiting. Just had some problems connecting. So, good morning everybody. My name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World. What's happening? And today we are talking about the real reason for inflation. So, let's see here. Let's move that out of the way. And sorry for this last Wednesday. I had a doctor's appointment, couldn't get out of it. So had to cancel the stream, but that's okay. Today we're on. Now, how many of you guys have seen this sticker right here? This Biden, I did that sticker. I'm seeing this all over the place, right? This is one of those things that conservatives and stuff put on, gas pumps in order to make themselves feel good. And it's kind of it's an example of how people really don't understand the economy and especially how they don't understand inflation in general, you know? Because this basically gives a like a misunderstanding because the president or the government in general really doesn't have much in the way of control over the price of any given commodity. Not really. Or even they don't even really have much of a control over inflation at all. Not not very much. There are things they can do to influence inflation. Trade policy and things like you know, um, setting interest rates, stuff like that. Right. But in general, it's not like the president can wake up and be like, gas is going to cost $5 more per barrel, and then that gets translated into the pump or what. No, doesn't really work like that. But you see these stickers all over the place because, um, basically people are misinformed. And, the general public really doesn't have much of a good idea about how prices work, how the economy works, how our system of, our economic system actually works, and nothing. They don't really have any idea like that whatsoever. And, they've been misled by conservative media into thinking that somehow the government controls these things, controls the prices of food and consumer goods, like computers or, electronic, um, you know, consumer goods, stuff like that, game systems, or necessities like gasoline, right? And it's just simply not true. And this is not something that's unique to Joe Biden. Joe Biden is getting hammered for this stuff nowadays because inflation is rather high right now. It's at 6% this year across the board. It's gone up from last year, right? Let me just move all this stuff around. Pony Throat, thank you for joining. Lewis the Hedgehog, thanks for joining. Yes, I'm here. Cody Course, thank you for joining as well. We have Cody Course to thank for this subject, by the way. This was suggested by him, so thank you, Cody. Sorry I couldn't do it on Wednesday, but we're doing it now. So anyway, inflation is up roughly 6% this year. Before we get into this, though, this is what we were working on last time, and I think we'll just continue on with it. I did a little bit here to I want to add a lower jaw to it, so we're going to add a lower jaw, and that's why I sort of, broke the head up like that. So that's what we're doing. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, so inflation is definitely up, right? What exactly is inflation? Right. Well, this inflation is basically prices going up, right? And it could be caused by lots of different things. It's lots of there's not one sole cause of inflation. Before we move on here, just a heads up, I am not an economist, right? I am not an expert in in the economy by any means, right? It's just as crazy and weird and you know obtuse to me as it is to everybody else, and why shit happens. And, so if there's anybody out there who ever tells you that they can predict when, things are going to go up or down, or when prices are going to go up, or when the stock market's going to go up, or when the economy is going to crash, whatever. If there's anybody out there that says they can do that, they don't know what they're talking about. There's nobody out there that has that power. It's all people guessing, looking at the past, looking at patterns in the past. Well, what happened last time we had these same conditions, right? Ah, shit, screwed that up. Let's just move that back a little. What happened last time we had a big economic crash and following a pandemic, stuff like that. And you can get a rough idea of what's probably going to happen again, but nobody really knows for sure. So anybody, and even, even the most like the biggest economic experts out there don't get it 100% all of the time because they don't have crystal balls. So that's something to keep in mind, like, but what we can do is we can look at, the conditions of big events in the past, things like depressions and recessions and stuff like that, and what caused inflation before, and we can try to, we can identify the causes, and we can see when those same factors are coming into play once again. Um, and it doesn't look good for the United States, right? I mean, we've had basically a 2-year long pandemic, which we're still in, by the way. We're at kind of the peak of Omicron. Like if you were to actually go and read the mainstream news, they're making it sound like it's over already. And especially when it comes to the economy, they're always saying shit like, oh, well, as America opens back up, as we get back to work, as we, it's like, why are we going back to work? Like there's still literally thousands of people per day dying, not just being infected. I mean, there's like tens of thousands of people being infected. I think it got all the way up to like, I mean, like a million infections in December for Omicron. Like that's how like insanely contagious Omicron is, and it's just we're just lucky that it's not as apparently not as lethal. But since so many people are catching it and going to the hospital, we still have one 2,000 people a day dying, right? It's just sheer numbers, and then who knows about like all the other economic impacts, like and also like other people dying of other diseases because they can't get hospital beds, stuff like that. So yeah, this is like pretty bad news. But what we had is, we have this pandemic, which is still artificially deflating the economy. That's still happening, right? There are still people that are not going to movies and going out to eat and stuff like that because they're in a high risk group and they don't want to, catch this pandemic and die, right? And then, we also have a large number of people who are out of work still. This is still a thing, even though, people are hiring. It's a lot easier to get a job now than it was, say, a year or even 6 months ago, right? The difference is it's easy to get a shitty job. It's easy to get a crappy job at, the retail places, the shit. Go away. I will answer that later. Sorry. Forgot to silence my phone there, folks. This is all stuff that you should do when you stream. No, can't talk right now. Okay. Um, damn it. Now I need to actually like turn that off, or it's just gonna keep calling back. Fuck that code. That totally threw off my entire like rhythm. I was like kind of jamming there for a second. Okay. Anyway, yeah, where were we? We were talking about wages. We are talking about jobs, right? People hiring. And it is easier now to get a job than it was before, but it's easy to get a crappy job. Not so easy to get a good, decent job, like a job that pays a decent amount of money, right? And it's because, you know, a lot of the places, like, because basically what happened? What happened last year, right? Well, this is why inflation is up. This is why we have a 6% inflation this year, right? because what happened was a large number of people got laid off when the pandemic hit, right? And that resulted in, you know, a large number of people losing their jobs permanently, right? And the problem is that our economy is set up in such a way so that it's what's called a like a just-in-time delivery sort of model, right? So this type of model doesn't absorb shocks very easily, when it comes to shocks to the economy. Doesn't really doesn't really weather those types of things, like things like pandemics, things like interruptions to the distribution stream. Eh, that actually looks a little shitty. See, I want to add a sort of a weird. Oh wait, damn it! No, go away. That's not what I want. I want to delete that. How come I can't just delete it? Fuck. I'm gonna have to erase that, aren't I? Shit. So, like it doesn't really do well when it comes to shocks to the economy. These types of economic shocks doesn't really do well, right? Um, and you can't just spin down production and then spin it back up, because there's lots of different links in the chain, and that's one of the problems we're experiencing right now is this sort of problem with distribution, with shipping, stuff like that, because we put everything on pause, and it's going to take a little while for it all to come back, right? And that's one of the causes. That's one of the reasons why we have inflation right now. That's one of the reasons why prices of just pretty much everything are up 6% across the board. It's because we shut it all down, and now it's going to take a little while for it all to come right back up, right? And that's sort of a weakness in our economic system. So, what are the causes of inflation? Let's start at the very beginning, right? So that we can kind of break it all down. What exactly is fucking happening with our country right now, right? It's not as easy. You can't just like, this is causing this at the end. It's no, there's lots of different factors as to why inflation happens, right? And why we're in a kind of a unique position to get screwed right now. And it's probably going to last a little while. Okay. So if you were to listen to the mainstream media talk about inflation, right? They would tell you that, we need to merge this layer. Can I just merge it down? They would tell you that the reason why, there we go, merge. The reason why that inflation is happening right now is because wages have increased, because poor people have too much money, because they got too much money due to COVID stimulus, and now they don't want to go back to work. And that the poor people are just like refusing to like play ball, even though there's all these jobs out there that pay more now because the government is paying them to stay home. This is what you would hear from the mainstream media. So if you were to go to Wall Street Journal, if you were to go to you know, places like that, conservative media in general, right? That's what you would hear. These damn poor people, walking off the job. They don't know how to work, blah, 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 blah. They don't want to go back to the jobs they had before. That's kind of a load of shit, right? You'll also hear, well, it's because of government spending. The government is spending too much money. It's Joe Biden's Build Back Better plan. It's the Green New Deal. It's this, it's that. You know, these are the reasons why everything costs so much now because the government has spent too much and has increased the money supply beyond what it's, and not getting any value for it. That's also a load of shit too. Okay, that's really, yeah, those things are not the reason why the economy is screwed up. Not the reason why milk is costs 30% more today than it did, last year, or why housing is like ridiculous right now. We're kind of in the middle of another housing bubble, by the way, you know, and it's going to collapse too. I hope it doesn't collapse before I buy a new house and get locked into this awesome, because, interest rates are awesome now. right? But still, yeah, it's those are not that's not the reason, right? The real reason is because, well, corporations are greedy. That's the real reason, right? That's really the only reason why prices go up is because somewhere somebody decided we can make more money, right? Now, the reasons why they decide they can make more money are varied. Okay. And, there are market forces at work there. I'm not going to say that it's just, that it's all just guys in smoky back rooms someplace deciding how they can fuck the middle class, even though that, probably isn't that too far off. Right. There are market forces involved, sometimes when prices go up. Right. Um, you know, for example, shortages. Well, we have a lot of shortages, right? Um, by the way, I will read all of your comments, guys. Sorry, I know that I'm not reading them right now, but I will when we come to the end of the stream. Usually at the end of the stream, I read all the comments. So, Pony Throat, I'm going to read all your comments. So, keep commenting. You know, so things like shortages can cause, are one of the reasons why a company will decide to raise prices, right? Because, you got to keep in mind who actually raises the prices. Why does inflation go up? Because one company or another decided to raise prices. Well, who actually raises it? It's not the people who work for the company. It's not like you go to Kmart. I don't know if Kmart's still around. The people that work at Kmart don't decide, you know what, we're going to raise the prices. But no, it's the people who own the company, right? The people that run it, the CEOs, the managers and shit. They're the ones that set the prices, right? And it's because they basically did a calculation that said, hey, we could, you know, sell X number of this product at this price point, and we project sales will not be affected if we raise prices, right? And it's because of things like, market forces, things like demand. Demand is high for something, right? Well, when demand is higher, when everybody wants your product, you know, then you can sell it regardless if it's $5 or if it's $10. You're still going to sell it, right? You may not sell as many, but the price may, you still may end up making more money, right? So, and shortages can do that. So, take, for example, a PlayStation 5. Okay. PlayStation 5 came out in November of 2020, right? At $500, which was like fucking ridiculous for a game system, but not unheard of. There have been, this by, comparisons in the past, the original PlayStation cost almost that much when it first came out. It was like 4.99 or 3.99, right? You know, in 1997 dollars. The 3DOs were fucking $700 when they came out. I don't know if you guys remember 3DO. So yeah, it's that's not unheard of, right? That's not like completely super ridiculous, but that is expensive. And usually what ends up happening is that over, when it comes to game systems at least, right? Over the course of about a year, 2 years, there will usually be a price drop by the next Christmas. So, game system comes out right around Christmas. After about a year for the next Christmas, there will be a price drop. And the reason why is because most people will have, most of the early adopters already have it by then, right? And there's other reasons too, economy of scale. You get better at manufacturing something, you can do it cheaper, stuff like that. So there's other reasons why there's a price drop, but usually it has to do with, well, this next Christmas season we want to sell X number of units, and we project we'll sell more if we lower the price by $100, right? That didn't happen with PS5. Why? Because there's a shortage of PS5s. Because PS5 debuted 2 months before the pandemic hit, right? So this coincided with a shortage of computer chips, with a shipping crisis, right? With people losing their jobs, stuff like that. People can't afford to buy game systems anymore because, they're on fucking welfare now. They're on, it's irresponsible, right, to spend $500 on a game system, even if the new Godzilla game looks totally fucking awesome and you want to play it because it does. But still doesn't matter. You got to buy food for stuff like that. So what happened is that, well, They didn't have all the early adopters, right? And this is also because scalpers went and bought them all up too. That's another thing. You can get a PS5, you'll just have to pay 800 bucks for it because they all got scalped, right? So it wasn't, so the people who want to buy PS5s have not been able to over the past year, right? Well, that means demand is still pretty high, and they're still managing to sell them at the original $500 price point. And so that's why they have not gone down. That's why this Christmas that just passed, they didn't lower PS5s, like the price for them at all, right? And that's just sort of an example of what's going on. It's kind of like the exact same shit there, just with extend that to the rest of the economy. You know, we have shortages and shipping crises brought around by the pandemic, which has kept, prices artificially high for certain luxury goods, right? Those forces are starting to affect staple goods, things like food, bread, milk, stuff like that, eggs. Although the prices of those things are still relatively very low. It's like, okay, well, milk may have been $3.60 before the pandemic, and now it's $4.60, something like that, right? I mean, this is all depending on where you live. If you live in New York City, it's going to cost more than if you live in Kansas. That's just how it is, right? But still, on the average, it hasn't gone up, but it has gone up a little bit. It's gone up about 6% on the average, which that doesn't seem very much, right? Something's a dollar, then it costs $1.06 afterwards. Doesn't seem like it would be that much, right? Well, then if you take in mind, well, let's say you have an $800 grocery bill every month. Let's say you have 3 kids, right? You could easily spend $800 or more, on if you have a large family, right? Um, yeah, that's not inconceivable, right? So imagine that goes up by 6%, So now you're looking at an extra, 30, 40, $50, right? Well, keep in mind most people were not doing that well before the pandemic hit anyway, right? Especially if you're like what's considered part of the, working class. If you're working at a job that doesn't pay very much, minimum wage or something like that, every penny counted before the pandemic hit, and now it's even worse, right? And yeah, some wages have actually gone up because people are demanding higher wages, right? We'll come to that in a minute. The whole Great Resignation stuff like that, strikes, that kind of thing. That's a thing that's happening, which is good. But if you look, that's happening in response to inflation going up. People are saying, "Hey, I can't afford to work at your fucking taco place for minimum wage anymore. I need 10 bucks an hour. I need $12 an hour, whatever, because the prices of staple fucking goods have gone up by crazy because retailers have raised prices, right? Because they want to make more money. Because somebody along the line there said, "Hey, we could make more money. People will buy this shit. They have to." And we have an excuse. Oh, the trucking company fucked us, whatever. Right? We have this excuse, you know. So that's like getting passed on to the consumer. And yeah, you could say there's other reasons, but basically that's one of the things that's one of the excuses that companies use to raise prices is they say, well, the production cost went up. You know, that can be a legit reason, right? That can be a legit reason to say that, this is called a cost push, right? Is the term they use for this, right? You make, let's say, PS5s. Let's stay with that example. You make PS5s, right? The price of the computer chips goes up like by 300%, right? And at that point, it's costing you, way more to make it, excuse me, way more to make your game console than it was just a few weeks earlier, right? Selling it at that certain price point that you had before doesn't make you any money, or it makes you far less money, right? And so you go, well, shit, we need to recoup some of this. So then you get your economist that you have on staff together, and you say, how much can I raise the price of this thing in order to offset some of this cost? And that's a reason why, and that's a legit reason. God damn it. Excuse me. Hang on one second. It's just when I start streaming, dude. Then I get all phlegmy. Let me drink something. Sorry about that. So, and that's a legit reason. But here's the thing about that. It's like they need to maintain that price point at a point where they can maintain profits as well, right? Because that is the whole reason. You got to remember the whole reason why any of these companies do anything is to make money. It's all about making money, right? This is a thing that you don't, especially like pro corporate like Democrats and conservatives, Republicans and shit like that. That's the one thing that they always don't like to bring up whenever they talk about the economy is that it's all there for profit, you know. And I think the reason why they never talk about this angle of it is because it instinctually turns people off, you know. But it's all about profit. Everything that it's all, everything that you buy, every place you get, it's all about making money. And like the airlines, for example, the airlines are not about flying people to and fro and um, enabling a society to have safe and efficient travel. That's not what airlines are about. Airlines are about making money, right? And if they could make money without sending up any airplanes, that's what they would do, right? So it's in a corporation's best interest, especially when you come to corporations and stuff. Corporations are entities created by the government in order to shield liability, so that people can make money and not have to worry about being sued. You don't sue Jeff Bezos. You sue the Amazon corporation because the corporation of Amazon is the one that has the liability. Right. Jeff Bezos is protected through corporate law, right? Because Amazon, the corporation, is considered a person. So when they say shit like corporations are people, that's what they're talking about. Like in the eyes of the law, Amazon is considered, has personhood. So that's the liability belongs to Amazon. So you'll never be able to sue Amazon and put Jeff Bezos out of business. That's not going to happen. You'll just, you know, Amazon, the company, will just pay you whatever it is you win and then suddenly claim to be bankrupt while, Jeff Bezos runs away with all the money, right? And it's in a sense we kind of need that sort of a little bit. We need a little bit of that of those types of shield laws, or else it's too risky to engage in certain industries. But you can balance that with the public's best interest, right? That is a stream for another time. Anyway, but still, yeah, it's very much all about making money, right? So they never talk about this aspect of inflation, right? Is that somebody, the reason why it went up is because someone along the line decided they could make more money. And it doesn't always have to be the actual retailers or the manufacturers. It could be somewhere else along the line. Somebody, um, like let's taking the PlayStation 5 examples, right? Uh, you know, One of the reasons why they're still so expensive is because the price of computer chips is still artificially high, right? Well, why is that? Well, we have this pandemic, and it's like I was saying before, it's one of the weaknesses in our system, right? What happened for the pandemic was that, well, people were put out of work because of the lockdowns, right? People stopped buying consumer goods for not even that long, just maybe a few weeks to a few months, right? Although a lot of people lost their jobs permanently after those lockdowns. We'll come to that in a minute, right? So that kind of depressed the spending power of American consumers, right? So the system we have when it comes to distribution, it's basically basically a just-in-time model, right? So that means that they only order as much as they think they need, right? And the reason for this is so that they don't have to spend a lot of money warehousing stuff. They basically just order. So if you say, okay, well, we're going to order PlayStation 5s, we're going to order 20 PlayStation 5s, right? So instead of ordering 300, they order 20. So that way they don't have to spend money guarding them in a warehouse. They don't have to rent the warehouse space out, stuff like that. The retailer just gets as many as they need, and then they show up on delivery day. The trucker drives it, right? And they order it ahead of time so that it gets shipped over from China, and all of it shows up in time for Christmas. And that's kind of how it's been working for, basically a few decades at this point, right? So this all got disrupted. People stopped buying, so they stopped ordering, right? So the company, Sony stops making PlayStations because it is a, bad idea to manufacture stuff when people are not buying it, right? You're just losing money. So, plus they had to lock down all their workers too, stuff like that. So everything just kind of went to, everything just sort of paused. But it doesn't just pause and then you can't just like, it's not just like hitting pause on the DVD player, you know, and then hit unpause and then it just all goes back to the way it was. It's like, no, people got sent home, shit got shut down, stuff like that. And it takes a little while for it to all come back, right? Well, some of these things that they manufacture, like for example, computer chips, have very, very complicated processes involved in actually manufacturing them. And also, very long supply chains on their own. They need things like silicone and lithium and all of these elements that come from all over the world, right? Like lithium mines in Africa, stuff like that, right? All that stuff has to get shipped to the factory and etc. And then also, yeah, when it comes to actually making chips themselves, it's a very long process that can take weeks and months, and it's very delicate, and you can't just pause it and then turn it back on. So it takes a lot. So you have to order things like chips like months and months in advance because that's how long it takes to manufacture them, right? So now there's this shortage because they shut all that shit down. There's this shortage of computer chips, and that's another thing that it's causing this artificial scarcity. So whenever you have scarcity, that really can result in inflation because when demand is high for something and there's not as much of that thing, the guy selling that thing can jack up his price and make a boatload of cash. And that's why. So that's why, computer chips are expensive. It's because there's not that many chips, that have been made. They're kind of a hot commodity right now. The guy selling the chips is making a boatload of cash, saying, hey, and it's just logical. And, that's capitalism right there. And to be honest, I'd do the same fucking thing. If I had a shitload of chips and people were spending, that before they were like $20 a chip and now they're $200 a chip, I'd be charging 200 bucks a chip. Sorry, that's just fucking, that's the way the game's played. And I'm not saying that it's fair or it's good or even the best thing for our society because it's not. And I think we're seeing the result of that now. We're seeing the weaknesses in our system, right? How our system can't handle these shocks like this. It can't handle being paused. It can't handle, disruptions to the supply chain and stuff like that. We're seeing all this stuff, and yeah, this shit needs to be changed. It can be changed in lots of different ways. We could manufacture things domestically to start with. That would do a lot to alleviate some of the supply chain issues. We wouldn't have 100 fucking shipping boats from China just hanging off the coast of California, being unloaded 24/7, just, in a holding pattern. And every day they're out there, it costs them a fucking $1 million, right? We wouldn't have shit like that going on if all they had to do was just, throw it on a train and deliver it from, Tennessee or some shit, right? Maybe this is one of the things that we should work on as a country. bring some of this manufacturing home, give people some jobs here for a fucking change, right? But yeah, good luck with that. That's probably not gonna fucking happen. Um, so anyway, but that's what it is. That's what it comes down to ultimately. The reason why it's supply and demand, just basic economics. When demand is low, prices go down because you're not going to manufacture something if the nobody wants it, right? And this can be bad also because this can be things that some people need but not enough people need. Things like medicine, right? Certain medicines are just not very profitable to manufacture in the United States. Things like, malaria treatments, stuff like that, right? And it can also be this can be due to industrialization too. It's like, well, malaria medicine may have been really expensive to make 100 years ago, but due to modern industrialized medicine, it's a piece of cake to make, and they can make it really cheap. But since nobody ever dies of fucking malaria in the United States because we've eliminated the cause, you know, at least last time I checked, I hope it's still gone, right? We don't have like, malaria carrying mosquitoes and shit in the United States anymore like we used to. They don't manufacture that anymore, but well, they still have malaria in South America and in Africa and shit. So those people get fucked because nobody manufactures the medicine. So, it's like this can be a bad thing. It can be a bad thing to make something too cheap because then it's like you can't make any money off it and nobody will make the money off it. So the only way that these people get medicine is through like fucking charity and shit, you know. And there are groups out there that, for example, kind of going off on a tangent, but there are groups out there that have made it their mission in order to help people like that and to cheaply manufacture things like medicine that people need, but that's besides the fucking point. It's like we shouldn't have to rely on NGOs and shit. Our economic system should be able to, I mean, accommodate when people need something, especially if it's shit that's going to like keep them from dying, you know, our economic system should be able to handle that, right? Like, hey, that's one of the shortcomings of fucking capitalism right there. It's like if nobody can exploit your problem, then you will not get a solution for it, right? That's really one of the major problems with capitalism. Nobody can make any money off of your suffering, then your suffering doesn't get alleviated. Really kind of fucked up. And that's why we have lots of problems like things like that, or things like homelessness. Nobody can make any money off homelessness, because homeless people don't have money, right? The environmentalism is screwed up. Why? Because no one's figured out how to way to make a shitload of money off of saving the environment. When it happens, when somebody can monetize environmentalism, then the environment will start getting cleaned up, you know. So I don't know. Maybe we should start a Kickstarter or something. Who knows? But anyway, but it's supply and demand, right? When demand's high, then prices go up. And that's kind of also independent of the supply. Not really. I mean, kind of, sort of, right? So there's market forces at work there too. So, for example, if we suddenly had a shitload of PS5s, if we got like a shipment of 1 million PS5s in the United States, prices would go down a little bit because places would start out competing each other to sell them all, right? But you'll never see it go way, way down. It's not like you'll be able to buy a PS5 for $25. I mean, they'd have to have 1 billion of them. But still, there are market forces at work there as well on the supply side. It just really seems not as much, and it's not as I guess influential. You know what I mean? You ever go to a corner and there'll be like three gas stations or four gas stations, one on each corner. And you look and each one of those gas stations is paying, they're charging the same amount of money for their gas, right? It's kind of how it works, right? And then if you were to go like 2 miles down the road, you'll see like a different price for gas, right? It's because those four gas stations they kind of have an unwritten agreement that, okay, this is what we're charging, right? in order to keep it stable, and then also in order to keep them from like, burning down each other's establishment and shit. But that's kind of how the market works a little bit. It's sort of like prices find, in a normal functioning economy, which is what we don't have here, prices will find an equilibrium. You know, you pay, if the supply of PlayStation 5s was adequate and it was around the country, right? And people had the disposable income to buy it, right? Then you would start seeing market forces working on it, competition, you know, and Best Buy would start to try to outcompete GameStop and shit like that. And suddenly you'd start seeing deals, and it's like, oh, buy this and get 3 games free, or we're offering a price cut on our side, et cetera, et cetera. That's how it's supposed to work, but it doesn't, and usually it kind of does work like that when the economy is normal and functioning and people have the money in order to buy the shit that you're selling. That is kind of how it works, right? Problem is that, the Austrian economic types think that's how it will always work. And it only works like that when things are optimal, you know. When things are not optimal like they are right now, when you have things like shortages and supply chain issues and, you know, large amounts of people out of work, 40 million people out of work for, months last year, right? And then 20 million of those people lose their jobs because of that, and still haven't gotten their fucking jobs back and are forced to look for something else, then that shit kind of all goes out the window. Then it doesn't really work that way, and that's what we're facing right now. This is why we're seeing, that's is why we're in the problem. We're seeing the issues with the economy and with pricing and with inflation that we are now, right? Anyway, and it's all really down to corporate greed. Right. You know, but that's what it is. That's getting back to demand. That's the demand pull, factor. When people really want something, they'll pay they'll pay more for it. You see this at Christmas all the time, real famous examples, fucking Cabbage Patch dolls. People went nuts for fucking Cabbage Patch dolls in like 1983, right? I think it was 1983. People went crazy over Cabbage Patch Kids, and it was like retailers were selling these things for like $100 each, and it's like a fucking stuffed doll and stuff. It was like this sort of it happens all the fucking time. There was another one with like Tickle Me Elmo and shit like that, and whatever. And now we're seeing that kind of thing happen with, gas prices, right? The oil companies are realizing they can make a gouge, they can gouge the shit out of people and make a killing. And, you know, some people in certain places around the country are seeing gas prices go way up. I'm kind of lucky here in California, the gas prices have not gone way up in California because mainly they were already expensive. Gas is always more in California because of taxes. There's certain clean air taxes that we have on the gas. And to be honest, though, another side tangent. This is not the first time this has happened with the gas prices thing. I remember this happening under the Bush administration, um, when there was a shock to oil prices because of the war in Iraq that he started. And people decided, like, they tried to blame him for this and said, we're going to boycott, we're not going to buy gas this week, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, same kind of thing. It's like, yeah, well, maybe he started a war which shocked the market, but ultimately gas is a commodity which is sold on the open market. The president doesn't really control that price. You know, I mean, he did start a war which did interrupt, production. So I guess you could say to some extent he definitely had an influence on gas prices in 2006. But I remember this, man. They were like, it was like $2 and then it jumped to like $5 in 2006. People lost their fucking mind. I don't know, maybe here in California at least. I know around the rest of the country gas is usually a lot cheaper. Anyway, we should have had those I did this stickers back then, right? So, let's see. One thing you're seeing a lot in the news, though, about all this is, well, they're trying to blame inflation on wage increases, right? And wages have gone up over the last year, about roughly 4%. But if you'll notice, it's lagging behind inflation. Inflation has gone up 6%, wages have gone up 4%. So even, you're still not making enough to keep up with inflation, which means your crappy job that used to pay minimum wage and now pays 9.50 an hour, right? That's still not enough. It's still not enough to keep up. You're still behind, right? And the thing about increasing wages are kind of like the last factor when it comes to anything. And it's the most easily controllable factor because all they do is they just lay people off. And layoffs happen all the time, every year in every industry, right? So it's not like you just suddenly, layoffs only happen when the economy collapses, like in the great, fucking recession or whatever. No, every fucking year, companies lay people off right around Christmas time. It's fucked up, right? Happens all the fucking time, right? And the thing about wages is that usually when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to restaurants and stuff like that, wages don't really are not really the biggest factor, like at all. What's really the biggest factor is distribution. That's one of like a major thing, especially when it comes to things like retail consumer goods, right? The reason why a PlayStation 5 retails for $500 and not $300 is because the trucking company is taking a massive fucking chunk out of that, right? That's where a lot of that money's going, distribution. And then of course the retailer has to make some money too, so they get them, they end up getting them for, 3.99 and they have to make a decent profit, so they mark it up $100 too, right? But here's an example. Okay, I've got let's see, here's a link, and I'm not going to open this, but I will put it down in the chat for you guys, right? A good example of how wages, when it comes to, say, this is the restaurant industry, right? This is an article from around 2007, I think, and it has to do with back then there was this push to basically raise wages for migrant workers, right? That's what this was. And in that article, they talk about how after 2 years of negotiating and, pressure from unions and like advocacy groups and stuff, that McDonald's and then also the company that runs Taco Bell, I think it's Kroger. I'm not really sure who runs Taco Bell, but whatever corporation runs Taco Bell also runs like I think Pizza Hut. They're owned by the same company, right? Anyway, those two corporations, the Taco Bell company and the McDonald's company, decided agreed to raise the price of the tomatoes they were buying by 1 penny per bucket. Right? So this effectively, what it does, so by raising it by 1 penny, right, it essentially doubled the wages of the people who pick the tomatoes, right? This was a major win, says, because what it was that each person would get paid about 40 cents for a bucket of tomatoes, and this would basically raise their wages like twice. So then they were getting roughly 78 cents, you know. And the thing is, it's like tomato picking is not that's not like a big time job or anything. And it's mainly like the majority of all the agriculture work in this country, especially when it comes to like picking the fruits and vegetables and things in this country, it's done by migrant labor, you know. That's shorthand for illegal aliens, illegal immigrants. Those are the people that come over here, and they come, seasonally. So they'll come over every season, and work in the fields to make some money and then usually go back home, right? And this is a thing that's been going on for decades and decades and decades in the United States. It's normal. Anybody out there who's got a problem with illegal immigrants coming and working, right? You need to talk to the farmers who hire these people, right? And who have been hiring them for decades and decades and decades, because this is how, agriculture is in the United States, right? So it's an industry where it's very easy for people to get exploited because they don't have voices, because they're usually not citizens. It doesn't mean all of them aren't citizens, but usually they're not citizens, and they get threatened with being deported and shit like that if they try to stand up for themselves, blah 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 blah, right? So this is why this is like a major big like win, basically raising these wages by fucking a penny, right? And that single penny increased their cost by $300,000, right, overall for the entire company, right? And you'd be like, oh wow, $300,000, that's a shitload of money. Not for McDonald's. When it comes to McDonald's, it's like an economy of scale. You know, by contrast, McDonald's made 20 like in revenue, they made $21 billion in revenue in 2007, right? And I actually looked it up, and they've kind of maintained that. They actually lost a lot of money over the last decade or so. It went all the way down to like 9 billion, and then now it's right back up around 22 billion. So they've kind of been holding steady all the way since then, right? So did raising the wages of the people who made the least amount of money in their I guess you would say system, right? The system of McDonald's restaurants, right? These are the people that made the least amount of money. Did raising their wages by, twice, by paying an extra penny per fucking bucket for tomatoes, did that drive McDonald's out of business? No, right? Did the price of McDonald's food go up significantly since then? Right. A little. At that time, it was the average. So there's an average, right? Because a Big Mac doesn't cost the same all around the entire country. If you live in New York, a Big Mac is going to cost you more than if you live in Kentucky, right? That's just how it works. But are you paying $8 for a Big Mac now? No. You know, it's been relatively the same, you know, um, where you live. It's been the price of a Big Mac is stable. It's increased a little bit. I know this because we have what's called the Big Mac Index, right? So I'll put that down in the chat for you guys too. The Big Mac Index, I'm not going to open that either. It's sort of a joke index almost, but it can give some real information. What it basically does is it tracks the price of McDonald's Big Macs, right? And uses that as a measurement of real inflation, and compares it to what the government says inflation is at. So you'll notice on that, actually, let's open it. Let's open that for a second here. Let's see. So let's go and let me turn on my window. So this is oh my God, fuck you. How do no, I don't want to sign in. Well, anyway, all right, fuck it. We're not going to look at it then. But you guys can check it out later yourselves. Basically, what that does is it has there's a graph on there with two lines. And one of those lines is the official government, um, you know, like numbers on inflation. And according to the government, that's what a Big Mac should cost. And then the other one is like, well, what does a Big Mac actually really cost in real life, right? Damn it, when I opened that before, it didn't make me fucking sign in. I guess maybe there was just you know, like a free article thing or something, and I used up my free article by opening it before. I don't know. That was probably it. Anyway, whatever. Um, right. And so what that does is, it's tracking what the government says it should cost, and then what it actually costs. And it's kind of a good tool. It's sort of a tool to see like, okay, well, this is how real inflation is really happening. And how much, and it basically says that, okay, well, The average price of a Big Mac now is about 4.50, and the average price in 2006 was like 3.30 something, right? And it's gone up like a buck in fucking 14 years. And that's not that bad at all. How much of that is due to other forces, right? Because there's lots of other forces. There's devaluation can be a thing that can cause your money to, your can cause inflation. You're basically the worth of your money going down is what is devaluation, right? That can lead to inflation as well. You know, this happened in 2007. I remember the dollar lost 25% of its value in 2007. So this is why you hear people saying shit like, "Oh yeah, this item cost 700 bucks in 1985, and if you were to buy the same thing today, it would be like $2,200 or something." Right? That's what they mean by that. It's because of inflation, because the actual spending power of the dollar has decreased by that much. Right. Let's see. It's looking a little. I don't know. I think we just need to make this all weird and asymmetrical. I think we should just abandon any pretense of trying to keep this looking like a humanoid demon person. Anyway, moving on. Right, yeah, so that's why they'll say shit like, "Oh, that's like, in 1985 dollars, which is super expensive today," right? Because the currency is devalued, and that can cause inflation too. People say, "Well, if the dollar is 25%, worth 25% less than it was last year, then I'm going to raise my prices by 25% in order to compensate for that." And that can lead to inflation. There is good reasons to devalue your currency. It can keep your imports high and your exports low, right? Which means that it's easy for you to sell things to the rest of the world, and people will be less likely to buy imports, which can bolster your domestic, economy, right? Uh, and countries engage in that kind of currency manipulation all the time. China, for example, is always keeping the artificial, the price of I think it's the yuan, or the yuan is what they call Chinese currency. They're always keeping their currency low as well. Oh, hi. Thank you so much. So, the wife brought me a drink. I love her so much. Anyway, um, so yeah, that could be a thing, right? There's also shutting off supply, creating artificial scarcity. That is another method by which prices can go up and down. Um, and this happens all the time. Also, corporations and cartels and governments do this all the time. And usually, when you create artificial scarcity, the reason why they do this is in order to keep prices stable, right? An example of this would be artificial scarcity. An example of this would be farming subsidies for the United States. Like for years and years and years, the government essentially pays certain farmers to just not grow anything, right? Why do they? And that sounds a little counterintuitive. Well, why the fuck are they paying somebody not to grow food, for example, right? The reason why it's because, well, manufacture, the growing agricultural process is very, very efficient. So it's very easy, for example, to grow corn in this country, right? The science has caught up, and industrialized agriculture has meant that they can get incredibly huge yields, right? Well, that can cause prices to go down, because if everybody's got corn, then they can all decide, they can all try to basically outcompete each other on how much they're going to sell it for, right? And that drives the price down because it's like, the people buying the corn are going to go to the person who's basically selling it for the cheapest, right? And that can cause, basically farmers to lose money, right? So they have these farms. So the reason for farm subsidies, every year we have a farm bill that passes in Congress, regardless of who's in charge. There's certain things that always pass. You notice that defense spending always passes, the farm bill always passes. And the reason why is because these two things are essentially basically essential to the operating of the United States at this point. Kind of shitty to say that for the defense spending, but it's a pretty huge chunk of our economy now. So, this is sucks, but that's the facts there, right? Um, so yeah, that's an example of artificial scarcity, keeping the price low, and it's to keep it um, you know, stable. It's so that it won't fluctuate way up and down, because having fluctuating prices is actually worse for the economy than having high prices, right? Excuse me. Right. When your price is the same and people know what it is, that leads to basically a stable let's see, it's much easier to for the economy to weather that than whether if it's going way up and down, right? If your prices in a commodity, for example, are just fluctuating wildly, that can scare investors away, you know, versus if it's just stable, then okay, well, certain people will invest and certain people won't, right? And that's why. And it's easier. It's like, okay, well, if wheat is always going to be 50 cents a bushel, then you can make predictions on that, and people will invest in that, and farmers will decide, okay, well, it's in my best interest to grow this much of it if this is what I can get for it, stuff like that, versus if it's just like one day it's 50 cents and then the next day it's $1.50, and then 2 weeks later it's down to 30 cents, then you can't make any of those types of plans, right? And it becomes very much more like gambling, and it can lead to lots of problems. It can lead to bubbles. It can lead to speculator bubbles. It can lead to all kinds of shit, right? So that's kind of the reason why they one that's one method by which this type of artificial scarcity is actually can be a good thing for the economy, right? And a good thing for inflation. It can actually kind of prevent inflation. It can also cause inflation a lot when you get things like, say, cartels and stuff controlling the price of a commodities like oil. You know, OPEC, for example, in the 70s, right? OPEC in the 70s basically got together and jacked up the price of oil and caused a oil shock that went through the economy that took literally a decade for the United States to adapt to, right? Whereas oil was really cheap before in the 70s, it was like, in the early 70s, something like translated to like 50 cents a gallon and shit. The price of oil was and it was because it was stable and it was cheap. OPEC comes along, jacks up the prices there, and it wasn't just gasoline that was the price of gasoline that was affected by that. It was also anything that used oil in the manufacturing process, things like plastics, right? And that happened all around the world, not just in the United States, but also in Japan and Europe and everything. Kind of fucked up the economies everywhere, and it was because OPEC decided, hey, we're gonna fucking like put a stranglehold on the production of gasoline because we want more money, right? And that's been a thing ever since. Every OPEC is basically setting the prices for gas, in so much that and yeah, there's market forces at work there too. There's it's set by like that, and then how many refineries are up and running at any given time, and what the supply is, blah blah blah. If there's any wars around that area, that may be disrupting supply, shipping, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, when it comes to inflation, it's a human being making a decision to raise prices. See, that's the thing, right? Everybody pretends, Fat Man TV, thank you for joining, man. Everybody pretends that inflation is some kind of like natural force that like it's a storm, that like it's a hurricane or an earthquake, and it just happens, and it's not something that we can control, right? Oh, inflation is hitting. That's why they always say, inflation hits, like it hits like a hurricane hits, or it hits like a fucking earthquake hits, right? You know, they never really, especially when you talk about it in like the mainstream corporate-owned media, that's how they always talk about inflation as something that happens beyond our control. They never talk about the reason why the price actually went up is because a human being made that decision to raise the price. A human being said, "Hey, oil is too cheap. We're going to raise it." Someone in OPEC said, "Hey, oil is only fucking 50 cents a barrel. We're raising this shit to like fucking $85 a barrel." Right? Which is like where it's at now or something. Last time I checked, it was like 85 bucks a barrel, something like that, right? Somebody made that decision. Somebody made the decision like, hey, milk is fucking, we could make more money selling this milk, you know. And then they use and it's really like these things that I'm explaining, these are just basically the excuses. Oh, well, we have to raise the price of milk because of the shipping crisis. Well, we don't have enough milk, so, you know, there's not enough milk, so people will spend more to take the milk that we do have. So that's why, Ralph's is deciding to raise milk by $1 a gallon. Shit like that, because somebody at Ralph's decided, hey, we could sell it at this price and people will buy it because they have to, right? That's basically all this shit I'm describing. It's all excuses. That's really what it all is. It's all an excuse for someone in the chain to make a shitload of money, right? Um, and it's like they can't raise it too much. They can't go completely fucking bananas on it, of course. No one's gonna buy milk if milk is 25 bucks a gallon, right? That's ridiculous. No one's gonna do it. Nobody could afford that. Only super duper rich people will have milk. Milk would be like gold and shit. It's only no one's gonna do that, but they'll raise it as much as they can as they can get away with it. And that's what's happening right now. Fucking with pretty much everything. And they're using stuff like the shipping crisis as an excuse as to like, oh yeah, well we don't have, you know, all of this stuff is languishing over there and it's costing us money, and people still want, PS5s and shit, so we're just gonna raise the price of them to $800 because people are still buying it at that point, you know. And it does, eventually hit an equilibrium even at that point. Eventually people are going to be like, I can't afford a PS5, and then all the people that can will buy it, and then the price will have to come down again. And that's usually how market forces work. Of course, you can always get things like hyperinflation and shit like that, which I don't really understand myself. I mean, I'd have to read more about the causes of hyperinflation before I can talk about that. So it's like there are those other types of problems where it's like it can just seemingly get fucking out of control, right? Um, but generally, that's what causes inflation. Generally, the cause of inflation is somebody ripping somebody off, somebody deciding they can make more money, and then those costs being passed on to the consumer, right? And this is why, because that's the thing is that, you know, right now profitability in every industry in the United States is like off the fucking charts, right? You hear all these companies and shit complaining about how like, oh, we're not making any money, pandemic, blah blah blah. But literally, like, it is profitability for every industry, and this is everything in the United States, every non-banking industry, put it that way, right? It's at the highest point it's been since World War II. So basically the highest point since fucking in 80 years right now. You know, it's kind of fucking ridiculous, Um, and you think about it, it's like, well, because if you raise your prices, right? Let's just take PS5s for example, using that as an example, right? Let's stick with that example, I guess. Taking PS5s, let's say you raise the price of it, right, by $200. So now it's 700 bucks instead of 500, right? That means that you don't have to sell as many to make the same amount of money you were making before, right? So you can cut back on your labor force, right? You can save money that way. You can lay people off. You don't have to spend as much money shipping as many units, warehousing as many units, buying the materials, the raw materials to make as many units. You're basically making the same amount of money or more with less effort and input and less investment on your side. And so this is why this shit happens. This is why it's actually sometimes beneficial for a company to actually make less sales overall, but because they make more money, right? And this is why it's like during this pandemic, the billionaire class in the United States have fucking like made out, you know, like thieves essentially, right? The wealth for billionaires in the United States has gone up by how much? I got it written down by 70%. That's how much their money's gone up. So basically came out to around $2.1 trillion dollars is how much more money, if you're a billionaire, like all the billionaires combined in the United States, how much more money they made because of the pandemic as compared to last year. So this is why you're seeing or not Bill Gates, but fucking Jeff Bezos build fucking rockets, right? And start flying around like, he's got so much goddamn money now. This motherfucker's building fucking rocket ships, right? While people that work for Amazon are making like what, 15 bucks an hour? And the only reason they make $15 an hour, by the way, is because they fought like crazy and like, they got Bernie Sanders and shit to come in and put in like, as much fucking like pressure as humanly possible, right? They didn't just get 15 bucks an hour because they asked Jeff Bezos nicely, and then Jeff Bezos said, "Oh, well, I'm making a shitload of money here. Let me give you some. I don't need this much money." No, that's never a thing that's ever going to happen ever. And you're seeing other stuff like around, like strikes and things, and then like there was the John Deere contract, like John Deere held out. And they actually got a pretty good contract. They're getting something like a 20% increase over like the next 6 years or something. Well, keep this in mind, right? Inflation went up by 6% this year, right? What if that keeps up? What if it keeps going and over the next 5 years it goes up by 6% again and again and again? Then in 5 years it will have gone up by 30%, overall. And those people that just fucking like went through a major fucking strike and all that shit in order to get like, for John Deere, in order to get a better deal, right? Their wages have only gone up by 20%. So now it's like even though they got a better deal and all this other shit and signed this contract and all that, they're still going to be behind. They're still not going to be making the same amount. Like their money will not have the same purchasing power as it did last year, right? So that's kind of like the downside to all this to all this stuff is that, the average ordinary worker still gets screwed. Like basically no matter what, you know, working for other people is kind of a chumpy fucking like you're never going to win working for other people. The best that you can possibly do when you work for other people is be smart with your money, right? Be smart with your money, invest, and try to get as much as you can so that you can invest some stuff and make your money work for you. Because just relying on your wages to live is like, you know, it's if you're not gonna win in the end. You're not gonna have enough, especially when it comes time for you to retire. You're not gonna be able to afford it if you're just relying on your wages, right? And just saving, just putting money in the bank and saving it and not investing. Then you're basically fucking like losing money losing money every year, and it's fucked up. And I'm not saying that I'm not rich at all. It's just this is the facts. This is shit that I'm trying to deal with too. I don't have like a shitload of money. I'm doing the best I can to like invest stuff and that kind of thing and whatever. This is a crisis that we all got to face. We all have to make good decisions and try not to, don't blow your money on stupid shit, even though I've got that problem too. I have far too many video games and toys for a man my age that I should own. I should be buying Bitcoin with that money and stocks and bonds and shit. Anyway, moving on. Um, but yeah, this is why basically inflation goes up. This is what's going on right now in our country, right? We were in the middle of a pandemic, which screwed up the supply chain. And our country, relies on this just in time delivery method, which basically can't handle it when shit is late, can't handle it when there's, you know, disruptions to the supply chain, right? So that's a big fucking problem. We laid off like a shitload of people over the last year, which we still haven't recovered from that, right? And one other thing that happened this last year is that a lot of those people that got laid off are now trying to find something better. They don't want to go back to the shitty jobs they had before because those jobs basically fucking abandoned them, right? Now imagine you work for a place, this is kind of a rare thing nowadays, but it used to be that you could get a job at a place and you could work there for 20, 30 years and they would take care of you, right? Not so much anymore. Most people, when you get a job, it's usually for maybe, a couple of years, maybe five. If it's a really good place, you might stay there longer. But most people, the idea of you're gonna like get a job at a place and work there for the rest of your life now and retire at the place, no, that's essentially dead. You should be prepared. You should always be prepared to find another place, whether you get laid off at a place or whether the place you're at goes out of business, right? You should always be prepared to look around and try to increase your skill set and shit. And that's just good advice all around. Always be ready because you never know nowadays, especially with like, the economy being shitty like it is, right? And the tendency for our economy to fucking collapse every 10 years or so now. You always got to be ready and try to have some money in savings to get through the lean times. That's just going to be like that's just kind of how it's just going to be in the United States. We're just very uncertain. Seems like it's been uncertain for like a decade now, hasn't it? Anyway, so a lot of those people though, who got laid off decided, hey, well, that place that I worked at had no fucking loyalty to me, right? They didn't take care of me. They just kicked me right out the door. So now that they're hiring again, I'm going to find something better. And, we gave people some stimulus, right? And enhanced unemployment to try to help them. And even though it really wasn't that much, it did do a little bit, you know. I certainly benefited myself from the enhanced unemployment, but I know that I'm in California, which pays a lot in unemployment anyway. I know that in other states it wasn't so much. I got an extra. It came out to 450 a week here in California, right? Which actually was like not bad at all. It's not enough to even live on where I am. Keep that in mind, right? But it did allow me to pay my mortgage, so that's nice, you know. But other states didn't. You didn't get that much money. If you lived in like fucking Louisiana or something, chances are you got like 150 bucks, even with the enhanced like extra COVID money. You wouldn't get as much. So it's really much, very, very, very much was not even around the whole country, right? But then we also got, some actual stimulus money, which most people actually use to pay bills. That's the problem. We got what around we got $1,400 or $1,200 and then another 600 and then 1,400 bucks after that, right? Most people use that to pay bills, right? Which is like that's the problem. It wasn't enough, Other countries did a lot more than we did. Other countries, Canada gave people two grand a month for fucking 4 months, right? So they got way more than we did. You know, in England, there was a program where the government would subsidize wages up to 70% of the wages. So If you got laid off, you would still get 70% of your paycheck, which certainly helped a lot of people. So it's like these other countries could afford to do this shit. How come we didn't? The reason why is because of Republicans, but moving on. That's why we didn't get shit in this country. That's why we barely got anything in this country was because of Republicans. Conservatives, Republicans. But moving on, but it was a little bit, right? And this small amount of money that we actually got for COVID protection allowed some people to take a little bit of extra time and say, well, I'm going to try to find an actual good job, you know. I'm going to actually try to like get something decent that can actually pay everything I need instead of like working at like this shitty like minimum wage job at fucking Kroger's or whatever. I'm going to try to find something good. College enrollment went up, even though, you know, usually that's what happens when there's a economic crisis like this. People go back to school because they want to get more skills, they want to get better qualified so they can get better jobs. So college enrollment went up, right? There were some other getting before we move on, but there were some other protections too. They did an eviction moratorium, shit like that. They did a moratorium on student loans. These things are getting ready to expire pretty soon, so expect some people to get evicted from their houses and shit. But this also allowed people to take time. They said, well, they didn't really need to work, as much, right? Because before the pandemic, there's like a very large number of people who were basically living paycheck to paycheck, right? I mean, that's just been a thing for years, And in 2019, there was a real famous study that got released that showed that the majority of people in the country couldn't afford a $400 bill that came up unexpectedly, right? And even after all of the stimulus, even after all of the enhanced unemployment, all that stuff, the average person's lot has not gone up by very much. Even right now, after all that shit, most people have less than $1,000 in savings, right? Which is like, think about that. Less than $1,000 to your name, you know. Most people, even still now, are basically two paychecks away from being homeless. And if it wasn't for shit like, the eviction moratorium and stuff like that, we would have saw a lot more. I mean, I couldn't find any numbers on the number of like new homeless people or anything in the country, right? I know it's out there. I know it's increased a lot because I'm seeing it, right? Even where I live, I've mentioned before where I live is kind of a rich area. It's actually very nice where I live. Even here, I've seen an increase in homeless people. I've seen people living in cars. I've seen people who are newly homeless. You can tell when someone is newly homeless because they have all new gear, right? It's like they knew they were going to be homeless, so they went out and they bought like new tents and um, like carts and stuff to carry their shit around, you know. And I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm seeing a lot of homeless people with brand new stuff walking around, and it's like, why? Because that guy knew he was gonna end up on the street, and so he's doing like the best he can to prepare for it. And it's fucking depressing, right? Depressing as hell, but this is reality, right? You know. So I know that it's bad, and without the things like the eviction moratoriums, it would have been like 10 times worse. And that's kind of something that is going to happen here pretty soon once they start once they start fucking like taking those evictions off, you're going to see like homelessness fucking kind of explode, you know. And there are things that people are doing, some of the states are doing to affect some of this, like for example in California we have currently the California state government has a $5 billion surplus, right? Because they actually managed to raise taxes on rich people a little bit. So they've got this like $5 billion surplus. And Gavin Newsom is basically saying, okay, we're going to use this to pay off people's mortgages so that you won't be, homeless, right? We're going to use it to pay off your back mortgage that you owe that you weren't able to pay during the pandemic. So there are programs like that. I don't know so much for other states. I can't speak to other states, but I know that at least here, somebody's trying to fucking do something about it, right? But is that going to be enough? Is it going to like prevent people from fucking ending up on the streets? I don't know. We'll find out. I think we're still going to ultimately need some intervention from the Fed when it comes to this stuff, right? But anyway, getting back to what we were talking about before, this has basically allowed people to, yeah, to not just immediately go back to their shitty restaurant and retail jobs where they were making minimum wage, right? And so this is why you hear this called the Great Resignation, right? Um, is what they're calling this, or the Great Walkout is another one, right? And it's basically, it's not just happening though with people with shitty, you know, minimum wage jobs. It's happening with basically every job in every industry. As people assess, like, well, what really matters to me, right? You're seeing, for example, a large number of people in the tech industries moving into jobs where they can permanently work from home, for example, right? Because during the pandemic, a lot of companies did that in order to keep people out of the office so that they wouldn't spread COVID around. And so people ended up buying houses in rural areas and stuff away from the cities, right? And they decided they like that better, you know? And I agree completely. It's like if you could make the money that you're making and live in a nicer place and have a bigger house and spend less money, and not have to fucking commute for 4 hours a day and shit, you know, who wouldn't want that? And people are taking the money they made, and they're moving to those kinds of jobs. So it's not just like people not, refusing to work at fucking Burger King. It's also like, programmers and QA people and, et cetera, et cetera, right? People that actually make, decent amounts of money, right? Deciding that this is what they really want. And then it's other people deciding not to go back to the jobs they had before, you know. We're also seeing a large number of teachers and nurses deciding to quit as well, right? A lot of that has to do with, for example, with nurses and doctors and shit. A lot of that has to do with basically the fucking you know, healthcare industry essentially on the verge of collapse in this country because people are too fucking stupid to get vaccinated, right? So that's one thing that's happening here. So we're basically seeing like, this giant surge because of Omicron and, conservatives and shit who have been listening to fucking Fox and OANN and stuff telling you not to get vaccinated, going into like the hospital because they, have been like rubbing fucking horse paste in their armpits instead of like socially distancing and vaccinating themselves and wearing a mask and stuff. Now they're taking up all the hospital beds, and a lot of nurses and doctors are just saying, fuck this, I quit because it's been 2 years and these people are too fucking stupid to like take basic fucking precautions. So you're seeing a lot of that shit. You're also seeing lots of teachers quit. You have like these right wing groups going in and like threatening them for making the kids wear masks and stuff. And so lots of teachers are like, all right, screw this, I'm out of here. You know, so this is like, it's kind of happening in like not every industry, but a lot of different sectors of our economy. People are basically like tired of, they're kind of fed up with bullshit. They're fed up with like working their asses off, never getting anywhere and having to put up with bullshit and like not making enough money and having to spend the money they do make on overpriced crap because they live like in a fucking like San Francisco or something where like, rent for a one bedroom apartment is like fucking $3,000 a month or some shit. It's ridiculous, and they're trying to improve their quality of life, and it's like more power to them. Good, I'm glad. Fuck them. And this is resulting in you know corporations and companies and stuff having to raise their wages for like and that can actually, yes, can result in inflation, right? You know, because they're offsetting that cost back to us, right? But like I said before, usually wages are the lowest cost that they have. Usually wages are the most controllable cost. So it's kind of bullshit. So any you know, in the past, when they do raise wages a little bit, when they have, like I used, with that McDonald's example, you know, it usually doesn't result in 6% across the board inflation, right? It'll usually result in a small increase in a specific product or something. And, they can even use the thing is, they can even use that to their advantage. They can even say, hey, we raised the price of this Big Mac, for example, by 6 cents in order to pay these people here and here and here. And people will go buy Big Macs because it makes them feel good to know that, oh, well, I'm supporting these poor people that are basically these subsistence farmers and shit. You know what I mean? So it's like it's not a negative thing to raise wages, is what I'm trying to say. It's like that's even it's positive all around, and it's not really the biggest factor when it comes to inflation, right? The real reason inflation goes up, like I said, is because somebody wants to make more money. Somebody along the line wants to make more money. So anyway, um, but yeah, this is like kind of what's going on in our country right now. So you have all of these factors coming together all at once, right? You've got supply chain issues, right? You've got people out of work still because of the pandemic, but also not immediately going back to the same shitty jobs they had before. You've got price gouging going on right now. That's most definitely a fucking thing, right? You have all of this stuff, and then you had, and this was all hitting an economy which was already pretty shitty to begin with, and the economy has been shitty for a very long time, right? In a sense, we never really recovered from what happened to us in 2008. 2008 was much bigger than everybody thinks. It hit pretty fucking hard. There were like many, many businesses, like big companies, big corporations like Kmart, Circuit City, shit like that. They're all gone now, because of 2008, right? Because of the fucking subprime, or the housing crisis, and then that reverberated throughout the economy. That shit's gonna happen again. There is a housing bubble right now that it's ridiculously high right now. Prices for houses are incredibly fucking high, right? That's another thing we didn't really get into is like another method that they can sort of control inflation has to do with interest. Setting the interest rate. So if that interest rate is low, that means that the price of borrowing money is lower, and that can contribute to inflation too. But maybe we'll save that for next time. I want to read some of the comments here because there are a shit ton of comments, and we're hitting 12:40, so we got to read some stuff before we end this. And Shoma, hey, what's up, man? Thank you for joining. Good to see you, bro. Um, I got your message, by the way. Uh, oh, okay. You need to put chat delays of a few seconds in the future to avoid most of these spam bots. Really? Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know that's what that was. All right. Well, thanks for the advice there. I'll do that next time. I do see a lot of spam bots here. Maybe we'll just remove some of these guys. So anyway, let's read some of the comments that we got. Okay. Once again, Cody Course, thanks for joining. And we have Cody Course to thank for this week's subject. Sorry again for joining a little late, and I will try to do better in the future. Okay, let's see. Lewis the Hedgehog, thanks for joining. Yeah, I'm here. Pony Throat. I always like to talk about inflation. Inflates your economy, making it big and round. Pony Throat, the government does have control over prices or inflation. Wilmar, Germany says hello. Zimbabwe says, okay. Venezuela. Well, so like I said, there are things that the government can do to influence inflation, right? But they can't necessarily turn it on and off like a spigot. So the things you're mentioning, like Zimbabwe, the Weimar Republic, that was like hyperinflation, you know. And To be honest, like I said, I don't really understand hyperinflation too much. I can't really speak too much to hyperinflation. That's maybe that should be a subject for another video. Um, but it seems like hyperinflation is usually caused when there's like the government artificially printing money in order to pay off debts, it seems, is usually what causes hyperinflation. So the government, like, for example, in Weimar, Germany, there was like a huge debt because of World War One, and the German government decided, okay, well, in order to pay off some of this debts, they just like printed a shitload of money, and that is what caused inflation to go up. And I'm not necessarily sure exactly why, right? Because the thing is, we have been doing that exact same thing in this country for a very long time. Even before the 2008 crisis, the 2008, housing crisis and the Great Recession, the United States government has been doing essentially that. And especially though after that, after the housing bubble burst, you know, they basically just kind of gave the banks all the money in the world. You know, Quantitative easing is what that was called, right? They essentially just poured money into the banking sector, and it was, to my understanding, not voluntary. It was sort of like the government went to, the federal government and the central, like, federal banks and stuff, you know, um, Federal Reserve is what that is, right? From what I understand, went to the different banks and said, "You will take this money," right? And that was like the reason why they did that was to keep them solvent, and it was to keep, um, from what I understand, the reason they did that was to keep like the price of, like, God, what the fuck am I talking about? The price of borrowing the money low, the interest rates low, right? Because what happened at that time was that basically there was a freeze. None of the banks wanted to loan any money out. And that was one of the reasons why all of these companies we talked about started going out of business, right? Like Kmart and Circuit City and shit like that. And a lot of those places, and not just them, but also a ton of small businesses went belly up during that too. Like fucking thousands and thousands of small businesses went up, closed permanently because of that. And it was because a lot of businesses, what they'll do is they'll take out a loan for payroll, right? Apparently. So it's like they don't have the receipts in for that month. They take out a loan, they pay their employees with a loan, then they get their receipts for the month, and then they pay back the loan. And so there's like these sort of like week, like 5 day to like 7 day loans that they use in order to pay payroll. And a lot of banks stopped making those sort of loans, those like payroll loans. And you can't pay your employees, and that basically led to a lot of fucking businesses just closing up shop. And that was part of the reason why they decided, like, quantitative easing was the solution. Was like, okay, well, fuck it, the taxpayer is going to pay for this, because if we don't get some liquidity in the market, then it's going to lead to like a domino fucking chain reaction kind of thing, which is going to like totally fuck the economy. So that's what I understand why they did that, Um, Now I don't know the reason why though. Like the reason why that didn't lead to hyperinflation in the United States. I don't know why. Because it kind of sounds like the exact same thing that happened in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe did the exact same thing as what you're saying, Punny Throat. Like printed a shitload of money and tried to pay off debts with it, and that led to hyperinflation, right? So I don't know why, and there could be many reasons. I really am not educated or informed enough to say why. I mean, it could be because the United States has a fiat currency, which is like essential to basically the world's banking system, and they just decided we're not going to do that, right? Maybe that was it. Maybe that was the reason why we didn't go into hyperinflation, right? Maybe it was because the money went to banks, and banks don't actually contribute to the economy very much. Like And maybe that's why inflation is happening now more because the money is going to normal, ordinary people who buy shit. And so because when the money just goes to a bank, they don't spend it on anything. They don't buy shit. They don't like build things. They don't invest in stuff, you know? What the banks basically did after 2008 is they loaned all the money out to corporations like Google and like, Facebook and all that. And what happens when a corporation gets a shitload of money for free? They basically buy back their own stock with it, right? Because if you run a company, right, let's say you run let's say you make PlayStation 5s, just using that same example that we've been using the whole stream, right? And you get a shitload of money. Let's say you're a Sony, you get $1 billion in extra money, right? You're not going to just take that money and make more PlayStation 5s with it for no reason, right? Because if there's no demand for your product, then that's just a waste of money. You're not going to hire somebody just because you have the money. This is the thing that like Austrian economics people, conservatives and people like fucking Paul Ryan and shit and Ayn Rand and shit. This is what they don't understand. This is what they always try to tell people. Like they always try to say like, "Oh, this is why you want to cut taxes for rich people because they'll take that money, the job creators will go and create jobs." It's bullshit. They don't create jobs. They take the money and they speculate with it. They buy back their own stocks. They put it in the stock market. They put it into investments, into bubbles, shit like that, right? And this is why you get a giant bubble that happens after every time there's a tax cut for rich people, right? You get a bubble, right? So Ronald Reagan cuts taxes in the early 80s, results in a savings and loan bubble that bursts, fucks up the economy, right? I don't know. You guys remember in 1989 they called it Black Friday, right? This was before Black Friday became like a holiday. Was it called Black Friday? I might have got that wrong. I think it was called maybe it was Black Sunday, something like that. I don't know. I can't remember. But basically, the fucking stock market collapsed in 1989, right? And this led to a shitty economy, and that was the reason why George Bush Sr. didn't get reelected, right? Um, Same kind of thing, in the 1930s, they speculative bubble. They cut taxes for rich people, right? Rich people speculate in the stock market, causes a stock market bubble, which leads to the fucking market crash in 1933, which contributes to the fucking Great Depression, right? So it's like, that's the pattern, right? And we saw the same thing happen again, right? Donald Trump cuts taxes, right? And the thing is, we were on our way to another stock market crash, and the pandemic hit and kind of made it all happen early. You know, Usually it takes about 5 to 7 years for the bubble to form and for shit to hit the fan. And it just so happened that this year it happened early because the pandemic basically caused it. What was going to happen anyway? And that's the pattern there, right? So it's like anyway, went off on that big tangent. Long story short, uh, I don't know enough about fucking hyperinflation to speak to that. So, anyway, Punny Throat, have you heard what Sonic Drive-In had to do to combat inflation? Google Sonic inflation for more information. I will check that out. What else? Punny Throat, the trouble with waiting until the end of the stream to read comments is that by the time you get there, the comments no longer have the correct context. Oh, yeah, well, maybe we could take a break in the middle. Maybe next stream at the 1 hour mark, we'll take a break and read some in 1 hour. So, see, the reason why I liked waiting till the end of the stream is because what ends up happening is that you just spend the whole stream reading comments and like, because I did that a couple times, and it was like I never got through my prepared material. So I always kind of want to get through my material at least for each stream. And usually I always end up with more material than I need. Like, um, you know, this time we actually managed to get through most of it. But okay, but yeah, that's a good suggestion. I think maybe next time we'll halfway through at the 1 hour mark. We'll take a break. We'll read comments for like 15 minutes and then we'll finish up. Um, let's see. What else we got? Thoughts on conservatives blaming Biden shutting down the Keystone XL pipeline for the high gas prices. Cody Course. Um, yeah, my thought on that is that it's bullshit. The Keystone pipeline was not running anyway, right? And that doesn't really contribute that much to the price of oil. It's a load of shit, you know. Um, Keystone pipeline. I mean, how much possible oil could possibly be pumped through the Keystone pipeline? Because you remember, oil is sold on the open market around the world. So the same oil that comes from the United States is not just immediately sold in refined into gasoline and then sold in the United States. It could be pumped all around the world, right? It's not like, so if you end one refinery here, like say if you had a refinery in Louisiana and that refinery shuts down, it's not like gas goes up immediately by 20 cents per gallon in Louisiana. That's not how that works because the gas that actually comes from is being sold there, comes from refineries and oil and shit, which is sold on an open market around the world. So it may be oil that comes from Venezuela, it may be oil that comes from Russia, it may be oil that has come from the Middle East or whatever. It just so happens that most of the oil that we get comes from, a certain amount of it is domestic and a certain amount comes from the Middle East. The majority of it comes from the Middle East, I think. At least it used to be like that. I don't know. I could be wrong now. Um, so yeah, just shutting down one pipeline that really wasn't running. Like at least I didn't think it was running. I mean, maybe it was, but that's not going to do much to increase the price of gasoline. I mean, the same oil that was going to be in that pipeline was already being shipped through other methods, through trucks, through boats and shit like that. So yeah, that's basically a fucking bullshit excuse, and it really doesn't have much to do with the price of gasoline at any given pump at all. It's a load of shit. So anyway, let's see. Pony Throat. The economic system was not made to help wage slave caste. The only action that the parasite elite will respond to is a bolt action lawsuit. Blood for the blood god. I don't know if we need to go Warhammer 40,000 on them just yet. But that would be a good idea. Hey, maybe they should have a another chaos god in 40K that's like the consumerist god. You know what I mean? Like just I don't know. They can call him like fucking I don't know something the consumer. Radagast the consumer or some shit, and he could just be like a parody of predatory capitalism. That'd be funny. Um, but a bolt action lawsuit. What do you mean by bolt action lawsuit? I've never actually heard that term before. Let's do a Google over here for that. Does that mean like wait, bolt action lawsuit? Uh, bolt class action lawsuit? Do you mean did you mean like by that yeah, I'm not actually seeing anything in Google for bolt act. Did you mean like a class action lawsuit, you know? Is that what you're talking about? I don't know. I'll have to look that up. Like I'm not exactly sure what that term is, but um yeah, I mean, we could, do lots of things though in order to basically to make the economy more equitable and more fair. There are lots of things that we can do. One of the things that we need to do in order to basically insulate the economy from these kinds of shocks is to basically bring manufacturing back to the United States. We need to do that, right? This like right now and like the whole thing with the distribution crisis and like the shipping crisis, all these ships off the coast of fucking like off the port of Long Beach and all that. I was actually down there not that long ago, over Christmas. You know, I went down and had lunch with some of my relatives. They actually live in Long Beach, and we drove by there, and it's like, yeah, you can see all the boats and shit out in the water, right? Um, that's one thing that would like if all that stuff was manufactured here, then that wouldn't be that big of a shock to the economy. You'd still be able to get some of the stuff you need, right? That's one thing that we can do. We can basically try to, yeah, raise wages, right? You want to get people to a point where they're not just basically working to like survive, right? Because it didn't used to be like that. It was much better like in the past. We were able, like somebody who had one job could afford to take care of a family and have their own place. Back in the 50s and the 60s and most of the 70s, right? And it really wasn't until the Reagan era when shit really started hitting the fan, when school started getting super expensive, when the housing prices just went fucking ballistic, right? It was really right around there. It was right when we sort of abandoned Keynesian economics and the conservatives came in and put in fucking Austrian economics, essentially. And that's when, like, you know, inequality went way up, right? The prices of all of the staple shit that people have been having for years and years went way up. And the ability, the sort of just, disparity between rich and poor just went through the fucking roof. And it was not like it wasn't like, super good to begin with even back then. Even back in the 60s and 70s and 50s and shit, the CEO of a company still made way more than its lowest paid worker, right? But now it's kind of fucking ridiculous. Now it's like, you know, the CEO of a company will make like 3,000 times what like its average paid worker will make. Didn't used to really be like that. There are lots of different things. Another thing we could do to get it back like that is to raise taxes. Like surprisingly, people don't really believe that or understand it. But back then, back in the 50s and the 60s and shit, taxes were incredibly high. They were incredibly high. Like if you made over a certain number of millions of dollars per year, it could be as high as like 90%. you know and this was all the way through the like World War II and shit. It was to pay off all the debt from World War II, even though they never actually paid it off, right? And it was really like, during the Reagan era when they started cutting taxes for the super duper rich people, and like, because what would happen is that people would get the money and they would invest it in their businesses, you know in order to avoid paying the government for it, right? Well, they don't do that anymore. Now they just get the money and they invest it in the stock market and then they create bubbles. So that's another thing we could do. I mean, none of these things would just solve the economy and make it the way it used to be. It's never going to be the way it used to be. You know, that's kind of over with. That era in the United States where, you know, having a working at a job wasn't wage slavery like you're describing, Pony Throat. That era is over with. It is very much, and I mean, now I'm not going to be one of these people that says that, well, working, is all work is slavery. I'm not one of those people, right? I don't personally even really like that term wage slave. I think that has connotations to it which are just not necessarily true, but it also is kind of descriptive of the situation that a lot of people are in. So, you know, I mean, I don't think it's completely like unfair to call someone that works at a job that they can't quit. I don't think it's unfair to call that person a slave, right? That's kind of the definition of what slavery is. You're unable to quit, right? And the reason, the difference is now it's you can't quit because you'll be homeless, whereas before you couldn't quit because there was a chain around your neck. It's kind of like the chain has just been swapped out for like debt. you know that's another thing we could do to make things a little more, to have a little more parity, is to get rid of debt for people, right? Which I'm thinking of making a stream on that. The easiest way to get out of debt is to not use credit cards. Right. At least that's one way to get out of credit card debt is just to simply not fucking use them. And I know this through experience. I'm thinking of making a stream on that of how I got out of debt because I currently do not have any credit card debt. I currently don't have what you would call bad debt. I don't have any of that. I actually and it was kind of a long process that I had to go through because I used to have a shitload of debt. I was in debt like fucking $30,000 and shit, and it took a long time to get rid of all of it. And I'm thinking maybe I might make a stream about just my own personal the things that I did to get out of debt and how I stay out of it. But anyway, maybe that's a good idea for another stream. Let's see. Okay, guys. God damn, there's a lot of comments. Hey, Jeannie B, what's up? Great to hear you. Um, let's see. Jeannie B, I did it pretty well for myself as a single lady under Clinton, but no way I could keep an apartment now on what Mel's pays. Did you work for Mel's? Well, so for you guys who don't know what we're talking about, that was actually my first job that I ever had was at a restaurant called Mel's Drive-In way back in the 90s. And if you've ever seen American Graffiti, the restaurant in American Graffiti is Mel's Drive-In, right? And they use that a lot. There were like pictures of scenes from that movie all over the restaurant and shit. And so that was one of the places we used to hang out at back then. Back. Anyway, yeah, that's true. Let's see. What else we got here? Dynacat, that sounds like a live version of Second Amendment solution. Oh, you mean bold action lawsuit? Yeah, huh? Plenty throat, bold action lawsuit. Wordplay on class action lawsuit and bold action rifle. Quite being so dense it means shoot them. Oh, okay. Well, quit being so dense. It means shoot them. Sorry, well, sorry, dude. I didn't know what you were talking about, but yeah, class action lawsuit. Yeah, I mean the thing with class action suits is they usually don't result in people getting very much money, but they the lawyers that bring them usually make a shitload of money. So, but you got to prove damages, and that can be very hard, So you'll see like class action suits for things like okay, this product that you bought, like for example, broke too easily or caused people to get injured, shit like that. I'm trying to think like what exactly would you make the suit on? Like, let's say you wanted to sue Amazon for what exactly? Like, you know what I mean? It's not that easy. It's like you can't just like sue. I mean, you can sue somebody for anything you want, but whether you're going to win or not, you have to actually prove damages. So I don't know if actually that would do much to kind of address the issues that we're talking about now. The sort of wealth extraction that because like Amazon is a good example of a company that has basically made out like a fucking bandit during this pandemic, paying people very low amounts of money, keeping people working and stuff, and when they're like catching COVID and dying and shit, and not doing much to protect them, stuff like that. So maybe the people that work there might have grounds for some of that stuff. I mean, I could see a class action suit for like people who worked at Amazon who were forced to work without sufficient, say, COVID measures. I could see that happening. So I don't know. Maybe it's but is that really a solution so much? Like it doesn't. It seems like that more of would just be like treating some of the symptoms to our problem and not really, because the problems we have in the economy are a lot deeper than that. They're a lot more systematic than just one company treating its workers badly. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a good place to start. I could definitely think of lots of probably on the basis of safety violations alone, where you could get a lot of class action lawsuits going. Anyway, what else we got? In Shoma, Mark, the extreme information you share isn't comment break friendly, and speaking from experience, when you have a lot of on the controversial plate, comment skipping is more than acceptable. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. I mean, I am probably gonna have to skip a bunch of this. Lewis the Hedgehog, perhaps there's a way to get out of this crisis involving cryptocurrency. Um, I would agree there. I don't really know, if that would be, I mean, I guess that would be part of the solution. I know there's some countries that are adapting cryptocurrency. Like, I think, wasn't it, what was it, like Ecuador, I think, adapted fucking, Bitcoin as part of their official, was it? Let me see. One of those countries in South America made Bitcoin like their official currency. Uh, Let me see which one. El Salvador. That's what it was. El Salvador is the first country in the world to make cryptocurrency Bitcoin legal tender. So, meaning that everybody has to accept Bitcoin. Right. That could be good. That can be bad. I mean, maybe that could be a good solution. I know that the price of Bitcoin has actually gone down kind of a lot in the last few months, which is actually a great time to buy some. So, if you have some extra cash, buy some Bitcoin. Um, I can say, however, that of all the investments I've made recently, cryptocurrency has given me the biggest like return, right? I can say that cryptocurrency has given me more money for my buck um, than stocks, right? By far than stocks. I mean, I'm not like a big time investor though. I do small amounts. It's more of like I don't invest any more than I'm like personally willing to lose. That's the way I look at it. Like I don't have like my life savings and shit in Bitcoin, or my 401k like all the way in Bitcoin, but I'm putting in a little bit of money every month or so and we'll see how it goes. That's how I'm looking at it. So yeah, that could be one of the solutions. I know that, cryptocurrency has created a lot of millionaires also over the last decade. People who usually wouldn't have become millionaires have managed to get a lot of money through cryptocurrency. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's one method, yeah, that we can use to kind of even shit out a little bit. Um, I don't know. I'm seeing a lot with that with NFTs as well. I have yet to actually engage in the NFT market because I think the concept is fucking ridiculous. Who the fuck is going to spend that much money on a goddamn JPEG? Right? But people are buying it, so fuck it. I might as well try to make some money there too. I'm thinking of making some NFTs just to like, jump on the bandwagon. And if someone's stupid enough to pay $500 for like some pixels on a computer screen, who am I to like, you know, who am I to refuse their money, right? I don't know. Maybe we'll do a stream on NFTs too. Anyway, guys, it is 108. I got to get going. Let's see what we got here. But I do want to thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate that. And I'm sorry that I was not able to join on Wednesday. Um, I'm going to try to shoot for Wednesday. If I can do it or not, I will send out a notification because apparently I finally have enough subscribers where I'm allowed to send out notifications through YouTube. So I will send out a notification whether or not we can stream Wednesday night, and I'll do it at least one day in advance so you guys know. Um, but hey, thank you all for joining. I really appreciate it, guys. You guys are great. Thank you, Lewis the Hedgehog. You're awesome. Um, Thank you, Pony Throat. Really good to see you again. Really appreciate that. Of course, thank you, everybody else here. Thank you, Cody Course, for coming up with this subject for today. If you guys have anything else that you would like me to talk about, feel free to make suggestions either in the comments or in, something like that, right? And we'll see. I'm always looking for new, always looking for new subjects, right? Let's see. Thank you, Fat Man TV. Great to see you again. Really good to see you. And let's see who else we got in here. And Shoma, of course, always good to hear from you. Jeannie B, always good to hear from you. Really appreciate it. You guys are the best. And if you like what I do and you want to see more, um, I have some other stuff here. Of course, got to do my ending speeches and stuff. So let's see. Let me turn on my video here. Laptop window. Let's move this over here. Okay, well, I do have a webcomic if you want to see more. Um, this is my webcomic at hoanja.com. I will put this down in the. Actually, I need to bring this over here. There we go. So, this is my webcomic. Please check me out there. I have an Etsy shop if you want to give me some money. And you like what I do and you want to support me, you can buy stuff there. I have a DeviantArt website, 100 DeviantArt. So if you want to see more of my artwork, please check me out on DeviantArt. It's down, that's my DeviantArt link. And if you want to see me talk about toys and video games and non-political stuff, you can check me out on UCD videos there. So, once again, thank you all so much. I really appreciate everybody coming. I will give you all a notification if we're going to be streaming on Wednesday. Right now, the plan is yes, Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. But if not, I'll let you know. For sure, next Saturday though. For sure, I think this is working out much better. Next Saturday at 11 at PST, 11 Pacific Standard Time. So once again, you guys are great. I really appreciate it. I love you all, and everybody out there, stay safe, and I will see you next time. Adios.